So, Mirthwood, a quirky little sandbox farming sim with a dash of a dark side. I have 100 days to see if I can explore, farm and fight my way through. Well, most of the time. I will also be stacking up as much coinage as I possibly can, in attempts to get the most expensive item within the game. This handsome chap. Moving on, without further ado, welcome to Mirthwood. Part 2. After my epic battle with the head-butting granny, I restocked on some magical juice, and checked out the chicks, who had a few oval snacks for me. After patting myself on the back for all the goods I've managed to produce, I followed up on the letter I had gotten. Ilara was the name, and Odd Elven Prophecy was the game. I got a history lesson on Duend, the big baddie of this land. Ilara and the stranger, whose real name was Surreal, stayed trapped in this world in order to keep his dark powers at bay. She then told me about some items that would help me within my journey. So after nabbing some hardwood and a feather, it was cave woods. There was some gemmy goodness and some berry badness. This bear, however, did not possess the magical power of popping out of existence, so it was simply stabby time. It did have the power to hit really hard, however, which quickly drained me of all my liquid last resorts. After the job was done, I managed to get a lovely new headpiece. A decent jump in defense. So me and my new winged helmed returned. I was in the process of getting the complex, fascinating lore of elves, but I skipped it. By accident. My bad. I'm sure I would have enjoyed hearing your life story. I got into a little scuffle with a wanderer on the way home, drank a stamina pot, and discovered they can block heavy attacks. Well, I never. Look at you, fancy pants armor man. Anyway, I swung by the shrine to see what offerings it needed. Full of energy, I got home to find my craft stations full of goodies, and my plots full of fruits. I had stamina to spare, so I worked through the night and had a little peek at the new elven sword diagram. But it really wasn't all that. I added the hag frame to the wall of pictures and did what I always did with extra energy. Chop wood. Thrilling gameplay, I know. One way to liven things back up a smidge would be to focus on the next upgrade for my pickaxe. Silver. But yet again, an even better way would be to make loads of money from all the aged wine I had been crafting, getting just over 4,000 coins. Exciting stuff. Once home, I spotted a letter that had landed in my mailbox. The stranger wanted a chat in the plains. Well, before a little catch-up, I had some farm work to do. Managing the winery, seeing all the chickens, and of course, my personal favourite, watering the crops. After some shut-eye, it was time to snag some silver in the remains at Widow's Glade. There was some angry doggos guarding the stuff, but there certainly was a very healthy amount to scoop up, and a rather spooky lady to defeat. It had the tendency to bop me on the noggin, and I had the tendency to use barrels that were littered around the battlefield. Then I finished it off in close quarters. All the silver was mine. Or so I thought, one more Spriggan left to deal with. After harvesting some of the never-ending onslaught of grapes, I went to bed. I was very close to having enough silver, so after mixing up some stamina elixirs, I headed out to investigate some new areas, and hopefully snag the last little bit. Inside a wall cavity, I thought this could have been the spot, but there was just a werewolf, some gems, and a feather. No luck here. But onwards to a new camp location, a friendly one and a not-so-friendly one. Here, some bandits wanted my stuff. I, however, also wanted theirs. After some parkour to get another feather, I went back to base, did some of the wine maintenance, and then went off to sell some odds and ends. Then collapsed for the day. I woke to a notification about a travelling merchant, which I certainly would be checking out. Right after tending to the crops and doing a little bit of an expansion, adding some storage for the ridiculous amount of grapes and strawberries I was getting, and 2 more barrels to ferment them in. Now to see the merchant, who was conveniently marked out on the map. Unfortunately, he didn't really have anything of value at the time, mainly just decor items. But the farm wheel had to keep on turning, and I did my thing to keep up. A little luck was on my side, it was raining, so that was one less thing off my to-do list. That evening I had the idea to get my feet wet with a bit of fishing. So I went to the store and got myself a rod, as well as get my green thumb on with some more seeds. I sold off some more wine in town, hitting around 6k. That's a decent pile of gold that could be invested in something meaningful. That something will come in the future, but for now I was exploring the plains in search for silver. Nature will never let you take anything without a fight though. I came across the rainbow pools and a feather. Eventually reaching the coast, where there was silver aplenty. I made it to the seaside town of Greyshaw, and got a not very nice welcome. Rude. Clambering my way up, I made a donation, and then hit the shops, grabbing all the health elixirs I could. But I wasn't here for a nice little sightsee and some quaint shopping. I was here for silver. So I gathered up what I could, helped a couple of gents with a angry yogi, and then stumbled into Rowan, getting me a lovely coastal painting. Absolute legend. At this point I realised I was close to Sybela, the lady who ran away from her husband Duncan at the meadery. I told her the sad end to Duncan, and was rewarded with a foot. No, not that kind of foot. A lucky rabbit's foot. It said it may improve fortunes when kept in the inventory. I really wasn't too sure if that meant in the tabs or if you had to equip it. So it'll just live here for now. There was also another quest to knock out around here, and that was the missing man Carter. After freeing him from a couple of froggy captors, I got nothing. Diddly squat. Other than the feeling of being a courageous human who did the right thing, I guess. I'm a much bigger component of the something more tangible reward. Oh well. I did get to enjoy a great gong sound, and a lot of resources that I could call mine. Home, and I had some smelting to do. I left it to do its thing overnight, and had a great start to day 49. Rain. I hung up the coastal painting on the wall. There are quite a lot of them now, aren't there? Well, there was also quite a lot of eggs that my chicks had been working hard on. Thanks, ladies. With all the silver in hand, I just needed the toolkit. While running back, I tried a bit of fishing, and got myself a carp. Gold was now on the menu. Very little time to celebrate, however. I had a farm to uphold, with some wood whacking, grape grabbing, and alcohol assembling. Because of all my hard work, I had no space to place my shinies, so another large chest was needed. I also needed to meet up with the stranger, so off I went, chancing upon Rowan and his forest painting. Utter gentleman. I had discovered a new camp within the plains and then eventually got to the stranger. Together we roughed up some bandits and their pet boars. Well, I'm not sure, but it did raise some very interesting questions that we will never know the answer to, sadly. I do really love the idea of battle boars, though. Well, after the melee, I got a level in melee, defeated the last chap, took a crown, and spoke to the stranger. Well, at least I tried. He was way too busy looking at a wall for a bit.
Are you quite alright there, buddy? Hey.
He said his thanks and reminded me I was the only one who could help him and Alara escape this world. Now for the bit I was waiting for. Loot. Or not. I bopped a boar, and then checked out the new camp to return home. As per usual, the never-ending needs of my farm were calling. I wasn't complaining, just thinking about all the coins that could be made. Speaking of coins, I had a plan for today, but not before adding a new addition to the wall of pictures. Then I grabbed a ruby to give to Wolf. And, well, that was that, getting a little renowned as a reward. I wasn't too fussed, this was merely a detour. I was here for gold, and yeah, there was a lot to pocket. There's also a sneaky invisible feather. A little odd. All the gold blocks weren't going to come easy though. There was a bunch of fighting to be had, from thieves to werewolves. So I spent the night clearing out the bad guys and raking in the gold, as well as a bit of limestone. The next day I found a shrine, a feather, and the town of Crossroads. Here I hit the market, not really finding much worth my time. So it was back to the gold gathering, and eventually smelting. Since I had been gone for a little while, I had a few chores to complete before hitting the hay. The fresh night was here, and so was a letter from Ilara, asking to meet her at the coast. First things first, I needed to do some of the old farming, before noticing a random chap who had wandered onto my land. The nerve. Well, onwards to the plains camp, where I was greeted by a thief and a boar. Wasn't a very safe place, it seemed. I got back to the crossroads to make a start on some of the quests I had seen there. I had a chinwag with Bogo who said the strangest thing had been happening in town. Valuable items would randomly appear in people's homes. Now that is definitely a new one. I started by finding a diamond and another job, one to kill a boar that had been terrorizing the area. I then gave a helping hand to Milo. He clearly needed it. Milo wanted me to get him some booze. Well, anyway, back to the investigation. I saw some footprints and found a note saying... I'm not too sure, I misclicked. Again. I headed to the location anyway, finding the stranger. And just to say, this is not the stranger, it's just a stranger. It's a massive difference. Just ignore what it says, it's all very confusing. I mean, they're even wearing the same clothes, but it's just some random stranger. Now I got that tidbit out of the way, I needed to find out why everyone was mysteriously getting richer. And to find that out, I would need to meet her in a cave. So I was going in a cave-like direction and discovered a lake, feather, and eventually the entrance. Here was Thieves' End. We met up and I got asked to help out with a bandit group that killed her family. While I was in the location, I had a look at this shop and bought a couple of diagrams, one for a rune blade and one for steel song. Back at the headquarters, and I did my typical odds and ends. The chicks had been extremely busy. You have definitely outdone yourself, ladies. I then spent some time doing some deep reflection. Realised no matter how hard I worked, I would never be able to do enough. And then headed out to meet the random stranger. Not the stranger, just the new stranger. At any rate, one gong later and I was there. It was time to beat down some bandits. These sorry chaps weren't really much of a challenge at this point. This was until the big bad Brom came in. He also had a big old head on him, Brom did. Just look at it. He must have extremely sturdy shoulders. Out of nowhere I did get some backup, and we managed just fine, getting myself an adorable bunch of hanging skulls. All I had to do now was talk to the stranger to get my reward. She, however, was not really in the mood for a chit-chat. For quite a good while, actually. I had to run away and come back. I did in time get the duelist blade diagram. I learnt that bit of paper up and remembered I had two more to look over. There was a clear winner. Steel Song, boasting a massive 35 crossed sword things. This was my next target, and one I could hit very soon. This would have to wait for tomorrow, though. And tomorrow, which is now today, I was hit with some bad news. A blight storm. This will eventually kill all of my crops. This definitely could have been worse, the timing was actually quite fortunate. Summer was drawing to a close, so my crops would be dying off soon anyway. I could focus on processing the absurd number of strawberries I had, just kicking about. And I had a chopping session while I waited for the very last 2 steel I needed. Then I put together the most powerful weapon yet. Afterwards something a little bit more mundane. Boil eggs. Around 130 of the shelled oval snacks, which got me a level in survival and a couple of skill cards. One for a better gathering rate when foraging, and the other the same for wild animals. So it was time to make bank on eggs. At the best sell spot, they couldn't even afford my old sword, so I bought some hay to make up the difference, and misclicked. That's right, I am now a new proud owner of a bull. Just gonna roll with it. I sold off my old sword and some eggs, and then rushed home to meet the new addition to the farm. I, of course, named it appropriately. Mistake. I also, of course, had to add the new adorable skulls to the wall of pictures, which I guess isn't really a fitting name now. It'll henceforth be known as the Wall of Things. It was the first day of fall, and I harvested the last few grapes and tore down the remains of my crops. The extremely profitable season had come to a close. I still did have a ridiculous amount of produce to make into wine though, so I had some hard work to do. There was also this season's crops to plant. I went for corn. There was also this guy to watch over them. I added a final detail to the crops and then went to make some serious money. My hands were kind of tied. I would have to if I wanted to give Mistake a decent home. So I sold off a load of wine and bought the barn drawing, as well as Mistake a new lady friend. I was a little short on wood to make the barn, but I quickly solved this issue. Well, not quickly, I spent the night chopping wood, but the next day I sprung into action and made the barn and went to plop it down. Well. Looks like Mr. Mistake was not a man to mess around, because I had already gotten a new little calf, who practically instantly popped into adulthood. Kinda crazy. Oh well. I stocked them up on some feed, did a round of egg collection and wine making, then I walked over to the shop to get me a milk pail, as well as sell some jam. Next I expanded my material inventory and eyed up the elusive unicorn. I would need to sell a lot of wine and jam to get this one. But one day. On this day in particular I was on a iron run, and I was marvelling at how great my new sword was. Later that night I kept up on the cooking of the jam and the iron. It was time to get my first batch of milk and then turn in for the night. I still had a good supply of fermented grapes left to turn into wine and then age on up. So if I played my cards right, I could very well be the owner of a unicorn. I guess time will tell. Something I could very much tell was how much easier enemies were to defeat now, with all of my new gear. This poor wanderer didn't really stand a chance. I did a little touch of fishing and hunting before buying a beer for Milo. He now wanted even more booze. A special mead which the shops didn't even sell. Guess I'll be keeping a lookout for that one. Someone I was always happy to look upon was Rowan, who had a plains painting for me. What a god-tier human. I had a poke around the place, mining some gold and finding a quarry, who had a angry piggy guard. I got a couple of the fabled feathers and a lovely little... At the entrance I glugged down a stamina elixir and chatted to Morwen. She was saying about how the place had been taken over by some bandits. So Big Hero was here to save the day. To start things off I got jumped by some twins. From then on out I got into a bit of a routine. Smash valuable rocks, kill a couple of bandits, grab some shiny gems, kill a bandit leader, until some crystal guys. And then same again. Rocks, cave walkers, rocks and bandits, until the job was done and the place was cleared out. So I went to meet Morwen at her house, but she was nowhere to be found. I searched every nook and cranny, but simply no luck. So I reloaded, and on my return, a quest had been completed, the one to take out the bandit blockades. That was a little strange. On further inspection, it seemed like Morwen was taking out the bandits on her way back home. Well, that's awfully kind of you. I helped her with the last few stragglers, and then spoke to her at her house. Unlocking a very handy-dandy herb shop. Great for all of your alchemist needs. Back to my camp, and there was an angry piggy, who I just ran away from. I used the herbs I bought to make 5 potent health elixirs. And then I had all my craft stations screaming at me for attention, so it was time to put my head down and get it all done, including some eggs and milk, naturally. One more item to add to the wall of things, and then it was off to look for some booze. The mead for Milo the guard, which I bought and then headed towards the plains. I got greeted by an extremely patient piggy, who jumped on me instantly when I spawned in. Big mistake. No. Not you. Milo got his mead, and he wanted even more alcohol. Annoyingly, I did nearly buy the vintage, just in case he wanted it next. Never mind. I was on my way to see Yalara when I met this grizzled chap. His daughter had been kidnapped by some ruffians. I mean, why not? I had time. The kidnappers got addressed with pretty quickly, and I was faced with yet another moral dilemma. She supposedly still had all of her money on her. Now, I don't want to say the bandits were idiots, but there was clearly a mistake made here. No, not you. I did the right thing, and let her go without pinching any of her goodies. Besides, I had the whole camp to plunder, getting me all sorts of things to squirrel away. It also looked like the daughter wasn't quite ready to leave her cage just yet. I think I'll just leave her to it. Up top was a feather, and then down low a thief, which gave me a level in melee. Unlocking 2 skill cards, one for 5% defense and one that makes enemies do less damage. How much less will be a mystery for generations to come. In any case, I was on the road to the coast, raking in all sorts of resources as I went, from silver to gong noise. It goes without saying, a few avian quills as well. Later that night I got into discourse with Gareth, who wanted a herring. I headed for bed in the local tavern. Here I also got the vintage for Milo, and since I'd learnt my lesson I also got a bottle of dead man's rum, just in case. It also looked like there was some people in need via quests on the notice board. The first one was to check out the lighthouse. It had supposedly stopped working. No one was really sure why. And the second to deal with a bear. So let's get to it. I got there and it was time to bear arms. I'm sorry. A little unbearable, I know. Alright, I'll stop that, yeah. The good news was the bear had already taken out some of the froggy fellas for me. Awfully kind. And then I took it down and got my 100 gold reward. Here was where I needed to set sail over to meet Alara. However, I needed 100 wood. So instead of that, I took a step back and did a day of fishing, catching all kinds of sea creatures. I got back to Gareth to show off all of my different catches, and I was rewarded with a boiled lobster recipe. At HQ, I toiled away at the jam, winemaking, and upped my metal output with 2 more furnaces. Then it was the farm side of things, harvesting corn, grabbing eggs, and also some milk. I got some well-earned shut-eye, and then strolled over to the blacksmith for a steel toolkit. Then it was essentially a repeat of yesterday, just waiting for the steel to cook up, until I could get my steel axe upgrade. Now I could hack down these big old logs for a hefty amount of hardwood. So that's what I did for the next while, stacking hardwood. I then used some of the limestone I had gathered to make an exquisite upgrade to the walls. Very grand. I trekked on my way over to Milo to give him the vintage. As I was hiking to the coast with the wood, I stopped by the herb shop. I made regular visits here whenever I could to snatch up herbs. Those elixirs are just way too valuable. During my adventures I came across a standing stone that only needed 1 more gong to complete. I then stabbed and smashed until I hit the boat, and built it up. Arriving at this little island I instantly found the last stone, as well as a locked lighthouse. A key was needed. It really wasn't too long before coming into contact with Old Man. He had come to terms with his soon-to-be inevitable end, so he couldn't be bothered with maintaining the lighthouse. He mentioned the key would be further within the cave. But it was guarded by Ethel the Sea Hag. Now, dear old Ethel was a massive pushover. She didn't do a single thing, apart from just stumble about. Poor thing. In all honesty, I felt a little bad. Oh well, anyway, the key was mine. I could light the lighthouse and blabber with Alara. We had an emotional heart-to-heart about being trapped in this world, and then talked about gathering all the binding stones from the shrines in order to face the big baddie, and defeat him. Back on the mainland I gave an update about Old Man. And I was given a meal to run over to him, so I rode on over to him, not finding him in his usual cave hole. A bit more rowing to another island, and here was his final resting place, right next to his late wife's grave. After that rather somber moment, I made it to the standing stone, and got my prize, a card that reduced stamina use. That night I finally got home, tended to my wine stations, and then passed out. The next day I got down to the farmer's life, but realised I was a little short on wood, especially if I wanted any new fine additions to my homestead. The only problem was there wasn't any wood to gather at the farm, an issue I've never faced before, so I set out in search of wood. Jumping from tree to tree, I realised barely any of these were choppable. I travelled up into the high pines, where there was plenty of the hardwood, but not wood, you know, the good wood. But there was plenty of dangerous animals and heavily armoured bandits. It's also very noticeable that enemies always make a beeline for the player, despite how badly they might be getting hit by something else. Anyhow, I got a gong, some goodies, a standing stone, and finally some small scraps of wood. Heading home fairly empty-handed, I made a small detour to get an expansion to my potions tab. Some good news, the wood had arrived back on my land. So after a little maintenance, you better believe I got to deforesting the place. Well, a slight lie, I had a long line of eggs to scoop up, and then I went to bed. But then, you better believe I got to deforesting the place. My next building project was the stable, so I brought along 40 aged wines in order to get the drawing. I then jumped from shop to shop to sell off even more, ending with a healthy 3,300 coins. I was then boiling up an industry amount of eggs when I got a level up in survival, giving me an extra chance for some more herbs. The stable was made and then placed down. Now all I need to do was purchase the unicorn and show it its new home. One day. And one day soon, because I was very determined. I spent the next few days smashing together jams, travelling to distant towns in order to sell off my goods, coming home, crafting up some wine late into the night, waking up the next day and doing it all over again. Carting off produce, gathering up resources to refine back at home. I actually managed to get through all of my grapes I had grown and moved on to making mead from honey. But yes, the grind was never ending, until one day where I did a round the whole island selling trip, pawning off every single bit of my hard work, eventually climbing to 9,430 coins. A little shy of the 10k I needed. Well, instead of just complaining about it, I decided to do some contracts. I was hunting the berserker boar. The fight was going fairly smoothly, then it just ran away. I searched everywhere for the fuzzy fella, until I decided to, Popping back in worked, luckily. I was then scouting the plains for a wraith, eventually getting to a rather spooky barn. Then the lovely lady made an appearance. This was quite the scuffle, full of dodgy rolls, blocks and lamp bonks. I told Helen the deed was done and got 300 coins. That's pretty good. Once home I made a couple of casks after I realised it was my bottleneck, in production, so to speak. Then I had an eventful evening chopping wood to make some fences. I also made a rather spiffing fountain, and a few things to place on the wall of things. It's getting kind of crowded here, huh? I added a fence around the chicken coop, in hopes that it would limit where the eggs would land, and making it easier to pick up. I then tore down all of the crops. Sorry, bud. To place down a fountain. I then rearranged a couple of things and dug in some connecting paths. I just about made it to bed in time. The chicken coop was over its capacity, so I put down 2 more stalls. I had been lugging these around the entire game. Then I assigned the seriously sad chicks. Some boiled egg power leveling got me to level 8 in survival, slowing my stamina drain rate. The place was starting to look a bit more well put together, and this inspired me, so I sold off a load of wine and corn, and then snapped up a bunch of decorations for the garden. A bunch of random plants and pots. Then I started to scatter them randomly all over the place, in attempts to make it look somewhat pretty. Not bad, I guess. For a good chunk of the day I mined up some silver, until late that night, it was time. It had only taken me 68 days, but it was definitely worth it. I was zooming. She got the appropriate name of Roach, and we trotted back together, where I showed her her new home.
See this one right here? Yeah, for you.
I took her out for a little gold run, running into a bunch of wolves. of the rare kind. After they were adequately dealt with, I got the gold and limestone. Now this went on for a good while. Then, something not so good. I was minding my own business, just galloping around, and this angry piggy nearly got the better of me. I just remounted and scampered off. It was a close call though. Back at camp, and I made a huge discovery. I could pick up all the fences. And there was a fair few I could just help myself to. The next morning I was gathering wood and yoinking eggs. The fence definitely did reduce the landing radius of the eggs, so I was rather pleased with that. I made yet another kiln and got to work putting down a new fence layout. I had to awkwardly push the cows back within the perimeter before trying to fence them in. It was quite the ordeal.
Oi. Oi. Come back. Yeah, that's it, mate. You ain't get... No. Stop. Get in. You little... Come on. Come on. Come on, mate. You are having an absolute laugh. Alright, you win this round, but I'll be back.
But I did eventually seal off the animal zone, and added a few more paths to link up the place, just a little bit more. Well, time to sleep that one off, and make some serious wonga the next day. Wine and corn was the way I went about this, obviously. And then, since I had already decorated the garden and farm, why not inside my little hovel? I picked up an oven, set of chairs, rug, hearth, dining table, wardrobe, candle stand, and a wolfskin rug. Quite the random array. Then I got to work setting them all up. Cozy. Keeping with my current theme, I made a wooden arch and some lampposts, dotting them all around the place. And a little fountain, for good measure. The rest of the day was a rather boring one, mainly chopping wood, cooking, and admiring my handiwork. The lamps really did set the mood at night. My next focus was tool upgrades, so it was onwards to the blacksmith. I sold off some stuff and got the gold toolkit, made it home, and made the gold pickaxe. Ah yeah. Alright, well, enough of this cozy base building nonsense. It was time to travel to other worlds and claim the binding stones as mine. The first shrine was in the forest, and it needed a bunch of herbs, so I punched them in and I went in. Arriving in a slightly trippy place full of mushrooms and spriggans, as well as precious gems. And more spriggans. And more gems. Eventually I did find the binding stone. And yet another spriggan, guarding the goodies at the exit. Inside the chest was a gold ring diagram, so that was one portal down. Morning of day 73, I upgraded the floor to hardwood and took some excess gems to pawn off, to buy a silver toolkit and some decorations, to, well, decorate the upstairs that I was just about to build. It was looking a little bare. I won't start the bear puns again. But it was a start to making the place look a little more homely. Oh yeah, there was a random deer just grazing around in the deep darkness of the void for some reason. So yeah, that was a thing, apparently. I upgraded to some slightly nicer walls and floors, and then started to take down the wall of things. Sad to see it go, it definitely became a staple of this playthrough. But it was time to lay out a proper home. Or at least try. That will suffice for now. I cooked up some bear, made a silver axe, and did a quick run-by of the animals. I made my way to the shrine within the foothills to see what it needed, and got rudely interrupted by a wanderer. Big mistake. No. So back home to get what I needed, and rest until the next day. Then I galloped on up. Before entering, I had a massive shift into a combat build, swapping out all of my skill cards, getting extra crit, extra melee damage, enemies doing less damage, more overall defense, and some more health. I was ready. This was a rather bleak place, full of crystal guys, wraiths, but most importantly, dead ends. I was very lost, for a very long period of time. I did somehow stumble into the binding stone and found my way out. I called my horse to ride home victorious. If Roach came, that was. So I had to run home victorious. Mainly thanks to my new battle skill cards, I was still extremely healthy and ready to take on the next portal. On the way I spotted something at my camp. The fences had respawned. There definitely was some potential to exploit this, but I decided not to. I was earning sufficient coins the good old-fashioned way. Farming. Well, anyway, I got the statue and popped in the metal bars to arrive at a space-inspired world, full of stars and planets. It was definitely one of the prettier places within the game. There was a good amount of froggy fellas that I easily cut through. I found the binding stone and fought a couple of enemies to escape. I was finally churning through the last batches of my wine. I was also on my final shrine, deep within bleak woods. Inside was a snowy blue spot, full of bears and wolves. The binding stone was easy enough to find, and I crossed my path with the last baddie. Gave it a good thrashing and then got out of there. Now I had all the pieces, I was to meet the stranger, who was extremely grateful, and wished me luck in defeating Duende. Actually, looking at this, reading this again, I'm pretty sure it's Duende. Yeah, let's say that. Yeah. In defeating Duende. So I got home to prepare myself for my toughest battle yet. I had a night's rest and got together everything I would need. And it was time. Time to ride into the darkest parts of Bleakwood and face off against the most powerful evil this land has ever known. Except I couldn't find the bloody place. And I searched everywhere within the highlighted area. I even got to this gate and was like, this had to be the place. No. Ah, well, maybe this gate. No. I had to search up a guide. I was that lost. But anyway, here's just a highlight of the distance between the entrance and where the quest tells you to go. It's quite significant. Well, alright, enough about that. It was time to fight the big baddie. I skirmished my way through all kinds of foul creatures to reach Duende. Talking to the guy, it was safe to say he was not a very nice person, if his evil valley layer full of skulls and twisted monsters didn't scream that out already. Well, it was time to brawl. He essentially had the same moveset as the thieves, with a minor caveat. He vanished away in a cloud of smoke every now and then sent out some of his monsters. Didn't faze me too much, just meant I got some more melee XP. That gave me extra critical chance. He did his usual roly-poly antics and I just kept stabbing away, sending out the last stab into his back. Then it was over. He dropped some extremely powerful Shadow Bane armor, the complete set. Rather dashing. So I rode off to tell the elves the good news. After all these years of being trapped in this world, they were finally able to go home. I met them at the portal for an emotional farewell. They stepped towards the They just kind of popped out of existence. It was a little strange. But not quite as strange as tending to farm animals fully clad in Shadowbane armor. It just seemed off somehow. This is a quirky little game. Definitely could use some work on its combat though. And if you like deadly spell-slinging combat, have a look at how I became stupidly overpowered within Drover. And I'll see you there. I appreciate your time. Stay happy.